We're live.
We are live. Let's talk international affairs. Here, with our high-powered graphic department. As you can see, the globe is still spinning in space. And that's a good thing.
It is. It is a good thing.
Hi, I'm Teresa Mitchell.
I'm Ani.
And this is now Bridge to a Better World. And this is one of those weeks where we started doing our research. And I want to say that Ani set up a wonderful frame for research to be done. And the further I got in, the further I got stuck. And because, oh my God, the details. But we want to talk about...
There are too many details.
There are too many details. We want to talk about genocide. We want to talk about climate change. And we talk about fascism. These things are very related. And so where shall we start? Shall we just plow into, say, Ethiopia?
Well, actually, I think, get in the frame, baby.
I'm in the frame.
Here, we'll do like
framed.
this.
All right. Okay.
We need to figure out, so, we don't need to have the seam showing, and yet we promise we'll work on our backdrop soon.
He's connected to the lights. Come here. Silly dog.
Oh dear dog.
Okay.
Oh dear dog. Mind blank. I know, it was climate change. I really feel like this week has been pretty significant in hopefully opening many people's eyes to the climate change that is accelerating around us right now. That has brought me to the idea that we have been in the fucking around phase for quite some time, and now we are truly finding out. And I'm wondering how much more needs to happen before we start seriously addressing nationally and internationally the very real issues of climate change. I'm just going to dive in there for a moment because, as I see it, climate change is, in fact, one of the key issues because it drives global migration. It's a part of the global migration crisis. People who would much rather be in their own towns, villages, where they've grown up, where they have deep roots in community, are forced to flee for their lives because of the disruptions that climate change brings. Then they're vilified around the world because they are landless, desperate migrants who are looking to take over our countries and ways of lives, as we hear from the European perspective, the Eurocentric perspective, I should say. And so I just want to look for a second at climate change and what is, in fact, going on. Last night I was watching a little news brief on the crisis in the oceans. As the ocean temperature rises, of course, we see greater storms. We see greater intensity of storms. We see greater number of storms, tropical storms, hurricanes, all of that. We see the horrendous flooding that's devastated parts of Afghanistan and parts of Brazil in the last couple weeks. And we hear about the great bleaching, the fourth great bleaching event in the coral reefs. 75% of the Australian barrier reef is bleached, in danger of dying forever. Sometimes coral reefs can recover. Often they cannot. Past a point, they won't. 83% of the Brazilian reef is bleached. The Fakarava Pass, which is in French Polynesia, is completely bleached. That is an area that's main industry is tourism and diving because of its beautiful coral reefs. Florida's lost 90% of its coral
Easy for you to say.
Not really. Florida's lost 90% of the coral cover in its reef track since the 1980s. It's a 40-year process where they're losing the coral cover. The higher ocean temperatures, of course, are a main factor in killing off the coral. And scientists are warning that climate change could wipe out up to 90% of coral reefs in the next 25 years.
And their associated nummy fish.
Right. This is actually beyond, damn, the reefs are pretty. What are divers going to look at now? This is important habitat for the ocean. And therefore, it's a part of the threat of global famine, since the oceans, in fact, feed us. They, they are hugely important in the sustaining of all life on this planet. So we add to this the killer tornadoes that we're seeing this week, that high winds ripping through a huge part of the states and northern Mexico, causing killer storms throughout. And we're looking at least one of those tornadoes in Iowa reaching the force 4 category, which means that it had sustained winds of over 200 miles an hour. Right. So top weather scientists say that we'll see record numbers of tropical storms and hurricanes this year because of the record-breaking ocean temperatures, which in fact are breaking records every week.
And 200 miles an hour, it's not like you can just hunker down in your oil skin, you know, and say things are worse at sea.
And all of this has been predicted by climate scientists, by meteorologists. This is really not so shocking to scientists who have been, in fact, saying, wow, if this keeps happening, it's going to look like this. It's looking like this, right? And in all of this, FEMA, that department of the government that is supposed to help take care of the population during major disasters, are predicted to run out of their budget by August because they've had more disasters to deal with. Last year, they ran out of their budget before the end of the fiscal year. This year, it's slated to do the same. But as FEMA officials have pointed out, the need for them is growing greater year by year. So how much more devastation do we face as a country and as a world before we actually center climate change as the real persistent threat that it is, and we prioritize our national resources, our policies, and our budgets to reflect that, before we say stop the business as usual, before we see another $1 billion fundraiser to just sort of wipe out some pesky regulations. These are the real consequences of that kind of political corruption and lack of political will.
We have to knock big oil out of power, and it is difficult to conceive. I feel like I've been part of the problem in that for years. I mean, literally for decades, I said, we need to get rid of capitalism because I wanted to put the idea out there. Basically, I saw that as my role. But it would be more helpful, I think, in the near term for me to say we need to regulate capitalism because people can conceive of that. We broke up Ma Bell. People don't know, younger people do not know what Ma Bell is. But imagine if you're talking to a younger person, they say,
or if you yourself are a younger person,
say, imagine there was only one provider for
telecommunications
and for everything.
Yeah.
And they jacked up the price whenever they felt like it, and they told you whether you could have service or not, and everything was on their terms. Well, the government that's what we had, and it was Bell Telephone, and the government broke it up, and this is what needs to happen. Well, actually, more than that needs to happen. But Big Oil is spending more than 100 million, literally more than 100 million every year, just to tell us that we're the problem, just to tell us that. We really need to cut down on these emitting things that we do. And I'm not going to say that we don't need to reduce our output. And I'm not going to say carbon footprint because that's their term. But the effective actions for turning climate change around are 1,000 to 1 on the side of big industry. And they are not regulated. Around the world, they are not well regulated. Because of the Americans. The only place where they're well regulated at this point is Europe, and that is because they resist to that extent American influence. Shell oil can have its way in Amsterdam, of course, I just have to say the exception. But generally, if you want to be in the Wild West, it's right here in the United States where you can put your corporation in Delaware and just basically get away with just about anything and tell the peasants that they're going to like it. Why don't you sit over here,
Hey,
Dougie?
dude.
Dougie is just really a special answer to showing the backdrop today.
Here, you keep talking.
He's hooked up on the lights again. The
Yeah,
lights are off of here.
again.
Come on over here.
Yeah, well,
Pardon me for being chubby. Okay.
sorry. That was I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Our beloved Doug, he's going to be 14 in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. In about 2 weeks, he's going to be 14. And, well, he's just a little doddering at this point. We're just going to say that.
And when he gets the lights around him, it's pesky.
Pesky, doddering.
Well, anyway, so the climate change, as I wanted to say, has direct effects. And we were talking about, I was saying, it's affecting the price of food. And Ani correctly pointed out that, the price of food that we see immediately in the grocery stores is simply affected by the oligopoly that, they decided that they wanted more profits and they raised prices together. And that's the long and short of it. So we have a big problem with not regulating capitalism, not regulating grocery here in the United States. But when I said it's raising the prices of groceries, what I meant was raising price of food. What I meant was in a place like El Salvador, say, you've got a small plot that gives you most of your food supply. You can go down and get some fish. You might have a chicken, and I'm talking about rural El Salvador. And you grow whatever crop is selling. Here comes a hailstorm, wipes out your crop. I mean, it has been just like that, or a heat wave, several days of really dry heat. You remember the 2021 heat dome here? It killed trees all over the place, but it wiped out gardens. I think people remember that. We had a honeysuckle plant where I can see it from the second floor window. It hasn't produced so much as a sprout since then. I thought maybe some of the seeds would survive. Well, no, it'd be gone. And this is happening around the world at this point. It does drive. Well, people have to get away. If you can't eat, then you have to go somewhere else.
And so it is driving that migration crisis. And if you can't eat, and if your town's been washed away with sudden flooding, again, you've got to go someplace. Where's that place going to be?
In the 60s and 70s, the U.S. military, with the historically unacknowledged help of the CIA, smashed Vietnam, bombed the hell out of Vietnam, tortured Vietnamese, and it was about oil tin, rubber, rice, and cheap labor. And we don't look at the CIA. 30 years ago, I made my mark, such as it was, as a CIA critic, and I was aware of where the CIA was and what they were doing. But I would say for the last several years, I haven't kept careful track the way I did. I used to be able to just spout off what they were up to and who was involved. But when we talk about flashpoints like Ethiopia, Sudan, Yemen, the U.S. military and the various secret police agencies, and we need to acknowledge that we live among secret police agencies and secret war agencies, are very involved.
So we're transitioning now into
the war part of
the global the devastation of regional conflicts, civil wars, and ethnic cleansings that are going on around the world. And I want to again put a little backdrop in here,
Yes,
a little
please.
personal backdrop of, growing up. I was raised by a mom who had gotten through World War II in Britain. We were absolutely. I was. How do we say? Brought up with the stories of World War II, with what World War II was about, and with the cry of never again, on our lips. In 2016, I had the very good fortune of being with my other mother, my bio mom, in Mexico City. And we decided in our several days of touring all of the museums Mexico City has to offer. You'd need a month. Um, but we selected a few to go to, and we decided that we would go to the Museum of Memory and Tolerance. And this is a museum dedicated to educating the public on genocide. And it was horrific. And the idea that, when we hear the words genocide, we automatically think of World War II and the exterminationist policies of the SS. We think about the millions of Jewish people, Romani people, the hundreds of thousands of gay and lesbian people, of those deemed mentally unfit, of communists, of anyone that would be a political opponent, uh, their extermination. So that's automatically where our brain goes. And then we say, never again. That's it. That was then. We know better now. We live in a new enlightened age. And yet I'm here to tell you that, of course, we see the genocide going on in Palestine and Gaza. We see that happening. It's like a genocide that's being live streamed, right? We see it happening in real time, and we have to decry it. We have to say no as loudly and as in many ways as possible. But Teresa just mentioned several other areas of the globe.
These flashpoints, we're very involved. Biden is daily being embarrassed by questions about and should be, about the ICC finally, the International Criminal Court finally denouncing Israel. And
actually requesting, the chief investigator has requested arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the Hamas leaders.
And the Israeli militarists complained that the Palestinians have a wonderful PR system, and they do, actually. They've gotten a lot of global attention they would not otherwise have. Not that it's saved them, but I'm going to bring up Yemen. The U.S. has been very involved in bombing the crap out of Yemen, and the Saudis have been doing the bombing with U.S. F-16s and billions of dollars in bombs and logistics. And that's we're talking about 1 million people who are actively starving. 1 million people actively starving. It is at least as bad as Palestine. 24 million people, 24 million are at risk of starving. They're wondering where the next meal is coming from, at least for the next day or so. And U.S., the Pentagon drives this because their alliance with Saudi Arabia is about, here we come back to oil, climate change. The message of all these little tricks that the oil companies come up with, like, it's your fault. You need a more efficient car. You need to cut down on this and that and turn your lights off. Look at this green algae. They shut that down. It was just complete bullshit that they were going to produce power from algae. The message from big oil is shut up about big oil, because if you really look at the dynamics, what's really happening, we peasants are living in a country that is very, very powerfully involved in driving climate change and driving war and creating fascism. So these things are very related. I want to talk about, for example, Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a terrible war going on right now. It's broken out for certain details, which I think Ani is more familiar with. But Ethiopia has gold, platinum, copper, potash, silver, gemstones, soda ash, tantalum, kaolin, construction materials, and mineral water. And hell yeah, U.S. corporations want them, which means that the CIA is involved. And let me give you something more specific than just claiming that the CIA is involved. Let's see, Borkana.com quotes Diakon Yosef, who's a politician known in that area. And he says that he's highlighted some issues. He says it would be misleading, to say the least, to present the image the U.S. was puzzled by one of the attacks, the big attacks on the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. He says the CIA is convinced that the leader there, who has received a Nobel Prize and is educated in the U.S., Abiy Ahmed, the CIA is convinced that Abiy Ahmed has reached a point where he can no longer lead Ethiopia. And there's a whole interview there that has the details. But the reason they talk about that is they are so accustomed to the CIA being that involved. And this is also true about Sudan. The big warlord there has had various interactions with the CIA, but one of the more recent ones, recent within the last decade, is that the CIA decided to get rid of him and brought one of his security deputies, I think his name was Gosh, into Egypt to talk about doing a coup, but Gosh was caught by the warlord, whose name I'm going to mix him up if I say the name of the warlord, and that's how involved the CIA is. What I'm saying here, the CIA is constantly meddling in these countries, and where the CIA is not doing it, the DIA is, and the Pentagon is, and the NSA is, and the problem that all of these organizations and our rulers have is that there may be an outbreak of democracy, because we are likely also to be frightened by climate change. You remember 2020, all the smoke. It was terrifying. The smoke has also gone from Canada to Washington. It comes close to people saying, we got to do something, but they haven't come around to the point of saying, oh, well, maybe we need to regulate. Maybe we need to look at what are the components of the civilization that we're actually in. And I know I am going on and on. Please interrupt me, because I could just start.
Yeah, and you have. And it's good. I mean, what you're saying is good information. I want to get into a little more of the multiple genocides that are happening currently.
Yes.
Because, it's important that we understand that when we loudly decry never again, it's kind of like the leaders of state had their fingers in their ears, or thought that they somehow or another are the exception to never again. Certainly, their situation is different, and being ruthless is the right thing to do because of I'm not sure what, but I'm going to say probably the CIA may have something to do with it in many of these cases, though maybe not all. I want to point out the oh gosh, where on earth did this even start? We don't know. But I'm going to point out the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar, right? Many of the Rohingya people fled to Bangladesh, where
they don't have enough problems, right?
Well, it's and they're not, the major large refugee camps in Bangladesh are overcrowded and not just don't have the basics. And so some folks are trying to actually leave Bangladesh and really have nowhere to go. So that's about 1 million Rohingya are currently living in the overcrowded camps in Bangladesh. About 600,000 Rohingya remain in the Rakhine state and are subject to persecution and violence. They're confined to camps and villages without freedom of movement, and they're cut off from access to adequate food, health care, education, or a way to make a living.
All in extreme heat.
Nearly 700 Rohingya people died last year due to drowning in efforts to flee their situations. In South Sudan, we have the Nuer and other ethnic groups. In West Sudan, we have the Fur and Masalit, who have been subjected to horrendous ethnic cleansing. Last year in June, there was a day of slaughter of the Masalit people in West Sudan, who were being driven out of one of the largest cities, and it's left about 10,000 people dead. Hundreds of thousands more are refugees, and entire villages have been destroyed. That's all in the last year. From April to November last year, there was a major campaign to target the Masalit people, and it does still continue. So there's those genocides. There's, oh my gosh, there's other, other ethnic cleansings taking place in the Amazon area, because major agriculture and major oil would like the land that indigenous people sit on. And those folks are in the way of progress, right? And so we see ethnic cleansing driven again by capitalism in the equatorial regions of the world. It's really kind of throughout the world.
And the Rohingya, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The Rohingya really do have one of the worst situations. We are talking about millions of people. Myanmar has basically told them that they are not welcome, and they do not have citizenship. I mean, by law, and they are being expelled from the land of the great and compassionate Buddha.
This
I
is
could get into
well. I mean, there's
religious hypocrisy, but
there's no need.
Yeah, they're being driven. First, they're being driven west and south into the coast where they already were, and then north into Bangladesh towards the mouth of the Ganges. And Bangladesh, as you may know, is already in a terribly fraught situation from climate change and everything else, and from a tremendous crush of population. But right now they are, and all of the Rohingya refugees who are approaching from the south are at the mercy of a big rainstorm. If there's a big rainstorm in the Himalayas right now, it will break a glacial dam, release a glacial lake, and it will wipe out 1 million people. This is going to happen. It's just a matter of time. They have nothing. They have no basis for an economy. So they've been selling these little pills. They have a weird name. I can't remember the name of it, but basically it's just caffeine and meth. And this is what they have. This is what they have. And so, of course, Bangladesh is saying, "Oh my God, we got this drug problem. These people are coming here selling us drugs. We have to get rid of them." And no one has compassion for them. They are Sunni Muslims, so of course Saudi Arabia is going to come to their rescue. Not
strangely, no. It's a situation of being a stateless people. What happens when you actually have no state? Because there's been political turmoil. Somebody else has started ruling the country, the land area where you have lived for generations, and have decided you're out. What happens? What do you do?
I know, it's like they're...
And so I'm just going to say that brings us to the rise of global fascism. So I'm going to butt in here just for a moment. I'm going to interrupt myself, and I'm going to say, I'm Ani.
I'm Teresa.
And this is now Bridge to a Better World.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
And we hope to see that better world, right? Looking at our situation globally, things look very dire. But it is through our concerted action, it is solidarity, it is coming together, and it is moving forward that we are encouraging here on this weekly live stream, Friday mornings with you. So take heart, good people. We cannot lose heart. We cannot. It is only by people acting together in our interests that change happens. And we have to decry what is going on loudly, and we have to make room for a new world to be birthed from the ashes of this. Which brings us to fascism. When people are unsettled, when people are terrified, when people have an idea that sweeping and gigantic changes are coming and are afraid, many people look towards Big Daddy to fix it. And suddenly we see a rise of authoritarianism as Trump put so brazenly, only he can save us now from the perils of the fill in your blank here.
It really has to be a madness for anyone to listen to that asshole. And I want to bring you back to, if I may,
please,
to 2020, when we had a huge fascism problem here in Portland. Remember Patriot Prayer? Does that bring it back? Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys, always creating trouble. And on August 29th, 2020, they decided that they would have they called it a Freedom Cruise or a Trump truck cruise or something like that. Anyway, they met up at Clackamas Clown Center, I often call it, And they organized a drive with the obvious collaboration of the Portland police into downtown Portland to punish Portlanders for harboring leftists. I say that because that is what they did.
Yes.
They got paintballs, loaded it up into cop-issued air guns, and just had a grand time shooting at everyone who was walking around downtown, and particularly at the people who were flipping them off, of course. And during that mess, Michael Reinhold followed a man named Aaron J. Daniels. Aaron J. Daniels, after the Trump truck rally had dissipated, was going around at night with his friend, harassing people. He was carrying a pistol with extra clips. He had enough bullets to kill about 36 people. They were tracer bullets used in warfare.
Just to be very, very, yeah. And you said that. I just want to be very clear that you were talking about Daniels walking around, hassling people, and had all these clips with tracer
ammunition. And for what we know from video footage and witnesses, apparently Reinhold showed up. I think in his mind he was protecting downtown Portland, and said, "Hey, you," and shot the man twice in the chest, murdered him. So he's lucky he didn't get shot at himself. He only got sprayed because that's what was in Reinhold's hand. He was going around spraying people with mace, with pepper spray, bear spray. So as you may recall, Trump then personally said that there should be retribution, there should be revenge against this man immediately, and the cops mobilized and did that. They cornered Reinhold in Washington State and shot him dead, and then made up a story that he had. Let me see if I can remember exactly how the story is supposed to go. That the reason he had a pistol in his pocket with nothing in the chamber is that as he was being shot at, or just before he was being shot at, he must have somehow fired shots, which they can't find. They can't find any casings at the police. They're lying about this. And then he would have had to eject the clip, because it was a semi-auto, remove the automatically chambered round, hide it somewhere it can never be found, put the clip back in, put the slide back, and then put the clip back in so that there's nothing in the chamber again. That's how obvious the lie is. And right now, the estate of Reinhold, his survivors, are actually suing over his death, alleging the officers had no plan to arrest him without using deadly force. And this is flatly true.
Right. And in fact, was called by the president. Basically, the president publicly ordered an assassination.
It was a preview of what we can expect if Trump is reelected, because it was Trump's seat in power that made all of these patriot prayer, and Proud Boy types and the extreme right in Portland and around Portland decide that they had the right, and it was obvious from the actions of the police, they had the permission to simply harass everyone to the left of them. And you can imagine how far, well, we don't have to imagine, do we, how far this can go.
Right. And so, around the world, we are looking at the rise of extreme right groups. We are looking at the rise of extreme right groups, fascist groups coming into power. The AFD.
Oh my God. You should just take down these lights.
Yeah, they think that's been a long time coming, baby. We don't know. There they go. It's over.
All right.
Yeah, there we go.
All over the road.
And yeah, all right. That was a good noise. Yes. All right. As I'm talking about fascism, comic relief from our geriatric dog. So in Germany, the AfD party has made some significant gains recently. They just won a mayoral election in Germany.
Alternative for Deutschland.
Yeah, and this has caused stirs throughout Europe because a party leader actually said with his mouth, not all the SS were criminals. This is actually just like 2 steps too far for the rest of far-right Europe, who is now kicking them out of of the far right European Union Party. So that's there. We have the Giorgia Meloni winning the prime minister seat in Italy a couple years back. There's the rise of the far right in France that we are seeing gaining ground. And of course, here at home, right? And I'm going to say the rise of the far right in Israel, of which Netanyahu is a part, is again a huge cause of the current state of the Palestinian genocide. And of course, here at home, we have US politicians who, instead of targeting climate change, instead of targeting poverty, instead of thinking that they need to throw their whole weight behind rebuilding our infrastructure as potholes eat cars, as um, as bridges are in sad repair, as all of our infrastructure really is due for some attention and some love and care. Instead of any of that, what are they doing? They're fighting wokeism. They're fighting wokeism, which is another way of saying that they are reinforcing and doubling down on racism and attacks against the LGBTQ plus communities. Instead of actually dealing with the very real existential threats that we are facing and say figuring out how to get more money for disaster relief so FEMA doesn't run out of funds to help people by August, only halfway through the hurricane season. Instead, we're the problem because we're saying things that make some folks uncomfortable.
Yes, and if I may state the obvious,
Please do.
when it comes to FEMA relief or anything that really needs to be done, if the U.S. government claims they don't have the funds, never believe them.
Oh, they always have the funds for other things,
Yes,
right? They always have
never-
funds for war.
Never believe they may not have them on hand designated for that for whatever relief, but they certainly have it. Incomprehensible amounts of money, trillions of dollars, for example, are in offshore illegal tax dodges. What's the name of it? Offshoring. I can't think of the word. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. The money's there. And
Offshore accounts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what it's called?
Offshore accounts, yes. Sure. And every time there has been a serious effort by a state or, recently by Biden to tax the rich, it brings in billions without difficulty. And that brings me back around to Biden. One of the things I think that is shown by the situation with Gaza and the bullshit that the State Department and Biden as the head of it are saying is that Israel is not negotiable by democratic action in the United States. It's out of our hands at this point. Not that it should be, not that we must not take it back, but Biden could not possibly stop the Pentagon from doing what it really wants to do. There was a president who tried that, President Clinton, and he was given a little message in the form of a Cessna that crashed into the White House without a drop of fuel in the tank, with a pilot who was later determined had died before the plane took off. It was a little message. Crashed right into the White House in a room where Clinton had recently been. It was the powers that be telling Clinton, shut up, get out of the way, we're in charge. Screw this, I'm the commander-in-chief stuff. When it comes to the really important stuff, which goes back to oil companies, the president is not in charge. And I'm not saying this to say that Biden can skate on this. He can take charge and he can risk it, as far as I'm concerned. If you're the president, then I think that comes along with, if necessary, risking your life. Same as being a police officer. You might have to risk your life if you're a police officer. And I do not agree with all this. We must, protect them at all costs. I mean, bus drivers have to face criminals on a daily basis, and they don't, try to save their lives by emptying a clip of bullets into everyone who confronts them. But this is what we've agreed to as a society, and these are the things that we refused or we are trained not to look at. But climate change is going to force us to look at these things.
And I want to point out the efforts being made right now by Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to pass a part of the Green New Deal to actually promote the repair and makeover of public housing in the US, providing jobs as well as reinforcing public housing, which is crumbling. Public housing has been plagued with black mold, with all manner of issues that make the housing less than really less than livable in some situations. But we here we have people in poverty in public housing that is taken over by black mold and other things. And here we have this very modest bill being put forth, this idea that we can, in fact, remake public housing. We can make it, we can do weatherizing, and we can look at making it more environmentally sustainable. We can look at passive solar, we can look at weatherization, like I said, and we can use this makeover of public housing as a model of the direction the country needs to go in. I think that's a significant step in the right direction. But of course, it's Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and Bernie Sanders. So it's going to be written off as those wild eyed radicals that somehow or another got into Congress or the Senate. And now look at these. They're just going to these ideas. Who said we could do this? We've got serious things to do with our money, like give it to the oil barons and that sort of thing. So, I don't know. Where else do you want to take this?
I just want to say I'm enjoying the comments. Thank you, John.
And Tad and all others watching. Whenever you're watching, leave your comments below and let us know your thoughts on these issues. How do we, in fact, break through the public numbing around climate change? How do we actually get folks who are stretched a little thin to take it seriously as an existential threat to us all, so that we can, in fact, how do we say, unite a more solid backing behind changing direction for our country and our world.
I think we need to be able to say, how about that exit door? How about that exit door over there? That'll get us away from the fire. The fire in the crowded theater analogy. Sometimes you have to.
That's a little complex.
Abby Hoffman once said, sometimes you have to shout theater in a crowded fire.
It's true. I remember that quote. So, leave your comments below. Let us know what your thoughts are on these matters and how you think we can start making some gains to get out of the mess we are in. I don't know, man. If we are in the fourth global bleaching event, if we know that the seas are boiling, that is causing the bleaching, and that is driving the intense weather systems that are devastating the midsection of the U.S. even as I speak. Right, these storms are continuing this week. How do we wake up and say, oh, I get it, the real cause of this? It's not just as John was pointing out earlier, the unprecedented event is becoming the new normal, right? Wow, we've never seen anything like this before, we say 3 times a week. How do we break through the numbing? Please leave your comments below. What are your thoughts on this? If you have not subscribed to our channel yet, please do so. Just hit the subscribe button and like this video because it helps. It helps it get shared and seen and shared around with your friends and family.
Yeah.
All right. Are we pivoting?
Let's pivot.
All right. So, pivoting now to the section of the show that says, right, it's all pretty dire, but we have each other. This is my hopeful comments to the community. We do have each other, and for that, I'm very grateful. We have some things to look at as we move into summer. This is a high point, right? We're supposed to, as we approach summer solstice, it in the northern hemisphere anyway, uh, it's a call to sort of be expansive in our lives, to really connect and be joyous, to fill ourselves up with all of the goodness and the promise of abundance that the earth offers. And it feels so, how do we say, incongruent with the reality around us of climate change, the rise of fascism, and the abuse of human rights and genocides that are going on, and how all of these really sort of evil things reinforce each other, are sort of part and parcel to each other, are driving forces for each other. How do we step back from that, acknowledge it, fight against it, and still try to embrace each other to build a vibrant alternative? Because building that vibrant alternative is the only way forward, near as I can figure.
If only we had, say, a tarot reader here to provide some
Well,
directions.
my cards say we have to really kind of deal with ourselves first and the fears that we have going on. We have three inverted cards this morning. It's
Uh-oh,
the Queen of Cups, the King of Cups, and the Ace of Wands.
the upside down kitties.
And what this tells me is that we are really kind of engaged in a maelstrom of fear, that our emotional selves are really needing some tending and care. We need to actually make some human contact and ground. We need to reach out to each other and have conversations that we can sort of work through some of our anxieties, some of our fears, because it is important that our hearts stay open. And right now, what I'm seeing in the cards and what I'm feeling in my life for sure is that tendency to, when someone is sad or afraid, sometimes it becomes lashing out as anger, because anger is an easier emotion to deal with than a deep sadness, than recognizing the horrors that are going on around us. And so, if you're feeling sometime over the next week like you just need to scream, I suggest that you, in fact, go well away from anyone else and emote and scream and take your best friend with you and scream together, but not at each other, right? That's what I'm saying. um that that we have to reconcile our emotional selves right now, because we're afraid, we're sad, we're grief stricken, and it's our tendency, I think, especially in this culture, not to deal with grief, not to deal with sadness. We've got pills for grief and sadness. We can take things and not actually feel them, but that's not true. We have to feel our feelings, and we have to know what feelings we're feeling, so that we don't just how do we say, flip to anger because grief is too hard. If you feel like you're about to have a temper tantrum, pull back and take some self care time. When you feel like you're going to stomp your feet and shake your tiny fist at heaven, know that that is only a part of what you need to do. Vent and, how do we say, um, get that out of your system, but then get about to the real work, which is community building. The Ace of Wands inverted tells us that we feel very intensely that we know the direction we want to go in. We see how we need to do and how we need to be, and it's slipping through our fingers, right? It's just a little out of reach because of, I'm going to say, being awashed in grief, being awashed in fear. It keeps us less active than we really need to be. And so, what I'm saying for this week, take care of your emotional self from a very deep level. We are at Memorial Day weekend. I know, a day set aside to honor our fallen soldiers, right? And more broadly, all of our beloved who have passed on. I want to say that it's far time to quit glorifying war. And, we do need to grieve our dead and honor those that have passed on, but let us not glorify war. And let us move past this, the more militaristic takes that are always present on Memorial Day weekend, right? Um, let us actually talk about peace and the need for peace, the need to study war no more, the need to lay down our weapons and embrace community, because it is only together and unified that we can get through this. And, it is dealing with our heart selves that will provide sort of a more fertile ground to dream on and to grow from. That's what I have.
Well said. I like that. Well, since this has been a rather grim show, necessarily, I think we need to look at these things. But I also like to turn to humor, and what you were saying was reminding me of the 80s when I was at the Art Cooperative in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas. We used to have 5 minutes of screaming in the kitchen. This is a 130-member cooperative, and we would go into the kitchen, close the doors, which didn't do much good, and bang all the pots and pans and scream. It felt great, and we would leave laughing. Maybe we need some of that. But along that line, if you would like to read my revised edition of my 2007 book, so now this is a 2024 revised book, called Jesus, Jeezus exclamation point. It is a parody of the Left Behind series, and I have altered it to have more resonance in the MAGA era, which is much the same, and you can get it for free.
Leaving a comment below.
I need your email address, so send it to my email address, polemics17@gmail.com. That's polemics17 and I will send you a copy for free.
All right. Thank you all so much. Yes, in fact, it is absolutely emotionally exhausting. Time to fill up our tanks, right? Fill up our love meters, fill up our ability to engage in solidarity, fill up our ability to engage in holding each other close and creating good community. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. And hey, we love you, and we will be back again next week.
Our love goes out to you and all the ships at sea and all the little airplanes.